We saw incredible comebacks. We saw red cards and quite possibly the first blink in the title race. Hey guys, my name is Izzy, and if you're new to this channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button below. And if you like this video, go ahead and tap that button as well. That will let YouTube know that you are enjoying this video, and others will as well. Chelsea hosted Luton Town on Friday in a game that I felt Chelsea needed to win. Chelsea had to come up trumps in this game simply because they have not started the season well. There are a lot of questions as to whether Mauricio Pochettino will be able to have complete control over the transfer policy that's going on at Chelsea. For some reason, Todd Boehly feels as though he has needed to revamp a championship winning side, a Champions League winning side, and a Europa League winning side, as well as firing and hiring managers left, right, and center. Now, Thomas Tuchel, in my opinion, is one of the best managers around, and why he felt as though he needed to eject him immediately he joined the team felt as though it was more of a power play rather than a concerted effort to try and make Chelsea better. That is why games such as these matter a lot to me, and trying to see what Mauricio Pochettino is going to try and line his team up with. I predicted this game to be a 3-1 victory. It ended up being 3-0. I thought Luton was probably going to be good enough to try and get a goal. That did not work out. Luton did have a very good spell in the second half where they made Chelsea look a little bit nervous. However, Nicholas Jackson and Raheem Sterling were very big in this game. Sterling himself, I feel, needed a game of this magnitude because ever since he joined Chelsea, we have not seen him imprint or stamp his authority on this team. You would think that Chelsea would be favorites for a game like this, but you never quite know, especially with the up and down season that they had last season, and just coming off of a soul-sapping 3-1 loss against West Ham, who had 10 men. You could see them feasibly, maybe even drawing this game. But I just felt as though this was going to be the just tonic for them. And a 3-1 victory is what I thought, ended up being 3-0. So 1 on that. Then Bournemouth took on Tottenham on Saturday. I thought Bournemouth were going to be good enough for at least a goal in this game. Tottenham are looking very well settled. They are playing very well. Their midfield seems cohesive, and I don't know if it's the fact that the Hurricane hoodoo is gone and the fact that the cloud that has been hanging around him for the last 3 or 4 years, since he was approached by Manchester City a couple of seasons ago, or the Manchester United links, and now finally the departure to Bayern Munich has finally been settled. We can see Tottenham start sharing the goals around, and you see them playing with a little bit more fluidity, some more happiness, and that's going to bode well for Tottenham. Now, I'm an Arsenal fan. I didn't enjoy seeing that. I was hoping that Bournemouth would at least try and make this game a draw. My prediction was a 2-1 loss for Bournemouth, but Tottenham still came up trumps. A 2-0 victory, very good defensively. They managed to shield Bournemouth and limit them to very few chances. So this is going to bode well for Tottenham. Up next, we have Arsenal, who took on Fulham. Now, a game that I had predicted would end 2-0 to Arsenal. They ended up losing the lead towards the end of this game and tied the game 2-1. A game that they conceded in the first minute. Now, Arsenal have made a habit of doing this, and for whatever reason, they seem to not be able to settle in well at the start of some of these games. Now, they have conceded in the first minute at the Emirates 3 times already within the last year. And that is something that Mikel Arteta is going to have to try and clamp down on. Teams are pressing Arsenal right from the get-go, something that you normally see from Arsenal themselves. And the fact that Bournemouth were able to do it last year, and the fact that now you see Fulham able to do that and try and hold on to a lead is going to be a little worrying for Arsenal. They need to start getting this season going. And with performances like this, you can see them dropping a few more points in the future. They face Manchester United in the week coming up. And while Manchester United have not been having the best season themselves so far, they have played 3 games of which they have looked very average in all of them. But these types of fixtures are the types that bring out the big boys. And Manchester United will be up for this game. And if Arsenal do not watch out, they will drop some more points right when they need to be challenging City. So I went for a 2-0 victory. It ended up being a 2-2 draw, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So next up, we have West Ham against Brighton. Now, a game that I had predicted Brighton to win and probably win a little bit more comfortably. I believe I went for a 3-1 or a 4-2, a high-scoring game. West Ham confounded us. They produced one of the best counterattacking and most clinical displays of football that so far we've seen this season. Now, Brighton has been a bogey team for West Ham. West Ham have surprisingly not beaten Brighton in the league up until this point. And with 3 exceptional goals, they were able to withstand the pressure and the possession that Brighton held for most of the game. I think the stats were somewhere in the region of 70-30. And for them to do that was absolutely outstanding. Brighton, who had looked very well organized and very well oiled in their first 2 games, were made to pretty much just kick the ball around, and they kept on prodding West Ham without the ability to execute. Towards the end, however, the West Ham goalie, Areola, had a couple of phenomenal stops. He was a very busy man for the last 15 minutes. And I do feel as though if Brighton were able to get this game to 3-2, they might have been able to swing the momentum into their corner. But as far as West Ham are concerned, I think this is a phenomenal result for David Moyes. I think that West Ham have started this season very well. They were really criticized so far in the transfer window for what they were able to put out, whether they're going to be able to use the Declan money well. But the Declan money seems to be doing very well. James Ward-Prowse has now scored and made 2 assists in 2 games, and I think they're looking good for this season. If they are able to hold on to Lucas Paquetá, the sky's the limit for West Ham. I still don't think they're above Brighton or maybe Brentford and Aston Villa in the pecking order, but they are doing themselves no disservice in some of the performances they've put up, especially holding off Chelsea at home for that 3-1 victory and going away to Brighton, which is not the easiest place to go at this point, and win. Next up, we have Brentford against Crystal Palace. So Brentford against Crystal Palace was a game that I saw ending as a draw. Pretty easy considering that their last 5 fixtures have all ended in either a scoring draw, 1-1, or a scoreless draw, 0-0. This one happened to be a score draw, which I went for a scoreless draw. So Brentford are going to be one of the teams that will upset the big boys, and I think will be pretty comfortable against the small boys. So Brentford are a classic mid-table side at the moment. They are well managed. They are well organized, and there's not much to say in this fixture other than the fact that Crystal Palace still show a very good amount of defensive solidity, and these sides were eventually going to cancel themselves out anyway. I think Crystal Palace are very, very well managed against Roy Hodgson. I think that's why they went back to him immediately after dismissing Patrick Vieira, simply because he knows the club, he knows the ins and outs of maybe the squad politics, and he has been able to bring in youth such as Olise and Eberechi Eze, and they seem to be doing well. So this game, not much to talk about. It was a game that didn't have that many opportunities, especially from the highlights that I saw, but a game that will bode very well for both sides as they pick up a point and they didn't really have to scrap too much for it. So that's as far as Crystal Palace and Brentford go. And our next game was Manchester United against Nottingham Forest. So I commented yesterday on the fact that I looked at the Manchester United scoreline at halftime and saw that they were 2-1 down. And immediately, I just saw this game ending as a 3-2. For whatever reason, these are the types of games that you see Manchester United have the ability to come back from. I stated before, I saw them do this before against Crystal Palace. We've seen them do this over the years, even when they had dropped down in quality, even post Fergie. Manchester United, whether it's the muscle memory of being a big club or playing at Old Trafford, these are games that they always seem to just come back from. Now, Nottingham Forest should take some solace from the fact that they were able to score 2 early goals. However, there is some criticism on the fact that after going 2-0 up so early, they were extremely negative for the rest of the first half, and they only did kickstart their fight back after they went 3-2 down, which was exceptional considering that they were also a man down. The red card has been a matter of conjecture, with a lot of people saying that it didn't seem like a red card. I still think the penalty decision was much more controversial. It might have been a tangle of legs. These decisions tend to go the home side's way, and even more so when you're playing against a vociferous Old Trafford crowd. United would have ended up winning this game anyway. I still have that feeling, as though 11v11, penalty, no penalty, Manchester United would have proven to be stronger than Nottingham Forest because they just have more quality. As far as the title race goes, or top 4 race, which that's probably what Manchester United would hope for at this point, because I don't see them challenging. They just haven't shown any type of squad chemistry or cohesion enough for me to think that they are going to challenge for the title. As far as the top 4 race goes, they've seen Newcastle drop points. They see Liverpool maybe not look their best, but still get results. They see Arsenal not look their best as well. So there's still hope for Manchester United, whatever you think about it. The transfer window is still open. They are definitely going to make a couple more signings, but they need to make sure that that hole that they have in their midfield, I don't know whether it's being caused by Casemiro, I don't know if it's by Eriksen or lack of organization, but Manchester United are not strong enough in the midfield. And that's why you've seen a lot of midfield players this window go for extremely huge amounts, because that number 6, then number 8 position are extremely coveted right now. The striker dilemma is still there, and we don't know how Rasmus Højlund is going to settle in yet. We're yet to see that. But Manchester United need to take control of that midfield. But they still were able to win this game, a 3-2 scoreline, no matter how laborious it seemed or no matter how unesthetically pleasing they are. United are still getting results. And football is a results-oriented business. They're still getting that right now. Everton versus Wolves. Now, this game I predicted to be a 2-1 win to Wolves, and as it transpired, Wolves won it 1-0 with a very late goal. Everton, I've tried to make as many excuses as I can for them. For whatever reason, they love battling relegation. It's been a constant story since the David Moyes days. He was very good at getting them out of those type of situations. And they are always pretty poor starters at the start of the season, but it's getting ridiculous now. And we've seen teams such as Sunderland, who have had the 9 cat lives, and still eventually go down. We've seen Southampton do that. And for a name as storied as Everton, it pains me to see them always toiling and being as low as they are. As an Arsenal fan, they were the second blot on our title challenge last season. But if I'm to put away partisan feelings, Everton is such a storied club. And much like I felt when Aston Villa were relegated in 2015 after that absolutely horrendous season, I just don't want to see Everton go away, because the season will not be the same if you don't have Everton there, if you don't have a Merseyside derby, if you don't have, some of the historically great players that they've had, Premier League ever presence, and at this point, English top flight ever presence. It pains me to see just how much they're toiling and the level to which they have dropped. They've survived many seasons now, but they can't keep doing this. As far as Wolves go, they still have extremely huge problems in attack. They don't score a lot of goals. They create humongous chances, but they just can't seem to put them away. And against an Everton side who are very toothless, never seem to have a striker who is fit enough to play. Calvert-Lewin is always on the injury table. And while that you can't blame him for that, in the sense of, unless he trains badly or unless he throws himself into challenges to where he needlessly gets injured. It just seems as though he's always on the injury list. Everton need to do something. They are going to get relegated if they continue in this vein of form. And they are a poison chalice. And a lot of top managers are not going to want to touch them, because that great name of Everton that I speak of is consigned to the 1980s. They are not that Everton side anymore. And we need a strong Everton in the league. They, alongside Aston Villa and Tottenham, were for a long time the best of the rest. And now they are just consistently struggling and toiling. Anyway, enough of my Everton rant. The next game that we have was against Manchester City. A game that I predicted would be a bloodbath was anything but. And towards the end was an extreme nail-biter from Manchester City. City have shown time and time again that it doesn't matter how much you peg them back, they will always fight back to try and win these types of games. And that was one of my reasoning as to why they will still supersede Arsenal or anybody else that is hoping to challenge them for the title, simply because they just don't give up. And Rodri's goal in the 88th minute showed you why. Because while Arsenal were toiling to a 2-2 draw against a 10-man team, Manchester City just turned up the gear, turned up the heat a little bit, and they won the game. Sheffield United seemed to have given them at least a run for their money in the last 10 minutes, and this seems to be a consistent run where teams will try and hold on long enough in the game and try to pounce in the last 10 minutes. And that's what we saw this weekend. We saw it with Liverpool, who were able to contain Newcastle with 10 men for the vast majority of that game, only to turn up the heat right at the end and snatch 2 goals in that instance. But here, Sheffield United knew that if they kept in the game consistently long enough, they were going to get their just desserts. And for a while, it seemed as though it might be 2 points dropped by both City and Arsenal. But eventually, the Manchester City that we know showed up. And it's kind of scary for the league that all they need to do is turn up the dial a little bit. And before you know it, they're right back up there. They did this without Kevin De Bruyne. They did this without Pep Guardiola, and Phil Foden started on the bench. So that should tell you just how good Manchester City are. Sheffield United are going to be relegation rivals for the likes of Everton, for the likes of Wolves, and they need to start getting points on the board. They are undercooked, and they don't seem to have a lot they can hold on to right now. It's going to be a tough season for Sheffield United. But on the basis of this showing, at least they did not get hammered like I thought they would be. Manchester City have a history of hammering newly promoted sides. So they did well. And that's all I can pretty much say for this one. And then we go to Burnley against Aston Villa, a game that I predicted to be a 2-2 draw. Ended up being a 3-1 victory for Aston Villa. Burnley did not face any teams for the last 2 weeks, and I think it showed a little bit in this game. Aston Villa are a good side, and I always felt as though that 5-1 defeat that they got from Newcastle was not indicative of the team that they are going to be this season. Newcastle were very buoyed by the fact that they're at home, and this is St. James's Park, and they always tend to beat Aston Villa at home. But on the evidence of the last 2 showings, I think Aston Villa have now showed us that they are a tactically competent team. Unai Emery, I feel as though, is right at the level that he wants to be. He organizes his teams very well, and I think Aston Villa is going to be right amongst them when it comes to being the best of the rest. I think they, Brighton, and on the showing that they've had recently, maybe West Ham might be somewhere as the best of the rest. Burnley need to make up their mind as to whether they're going to be pragmatic or whether they're going to be idealistic. And Vincent Kompany is of the Pep Guardiola school, so you know he's going to try and play football. It's what worked well for them when they were in the Championship. But the Premier League is a very unforgiving league, and you don't want his name to be the first one on the chopping block simply because he's trying to stick to ideals and not pragmatism. Against teams such as Aston Villa, who play a similar type of passing football, Unai Emery is one of those managers. I think that Burnley should try and play their level a bit, and they might need to be more pragmatic than idealistic. They will probably reap some benefits from that when they face teams such as a Fulham or a team such as a Wolves, who are more direct rather than teams who concentrate on intense build-up play. But only off of 2 games, I can't make a concrete decision as to whether Burnley are ready for the drop or not. I will give it a couple of more games to try and see if they will consolidate on this type of play or whether they will switch to a more pragmatic type of play. And finally, we have Liverpool against Newcastle, the marquee game of the week and one of the most intense games you will ever see, with one of the best comebacks and defensive performances that you will see this season. Liverpool looked dead and buried after 30 minutes in this game, after Van Dijk had gotten his red card and after Gordon had scored, and with Alexander-Arnold teetering on getting a second yellow card. What followed was just an impressive containment of Newcastle's attack and a very, very beautiful 2 counterattacking goals that Newcastle just didn't see coming. Now, this game could have taken a whole new complexion had Miggy Almiron scored the 2 goals that he promised. One, a very good save from Alisson, and the other that hit the post. Newcastle will feel aggrieved by the result, but you just don't count out a manager like Jurgen Klopp. And some Liverpool fans last season were even calling for his head extremely prematurely. And I understand it. When you're used to winning, or when you're constantly challenging for the title after the season Liverpool had last season, you can understand why some fans emotionally ran towards trying to get a quick fix. But Jurgen Klopp is the best in the business. He is right up there with Pep Guardiola, and his team had just naturally come to the end of their cycle. And you're now seeing Jurgen Klopp trying to build a whole new Liverpool team. And it would be inconceivable to not at least give him that chance to try and show what he can do with that. I think Eddie Howe is a very competent manager. Once he's been given the tools he is able to manage a team efficiently. The only one thing that I want to see a little bit more of from Eddie Howe is a little bit of that tenacity. He strikes me as an extremely pleasant guy, and that might be one of the things that endears his players to him. But once Newcastle get to that level to where they are going to attract a lot of the big name players, they are going to need a manager who embodies that as well. Somebody who, like Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp, is larger than life as far as their personality and the way they transmit that emotion to the rest of their team. You can see it in Pep and you can see it in Jurgen Klopp. And to a lesser extent, although he is still very nascent in his managerial career, you can see it in Mikel Arteta as well. So Newcastle, I guess you can say, we'll learn something from this game, but for some weird reason, they have a mental block against Liverpool, much in the same way Arsenal has a mental block against Manchester City, or the way Manchester City have a mental block against Tottenham at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Things like these happen, and you can chalk it up to a freak result, or you can chalk it up to a history of Newcastle not being able to get over that hump against Liverpool. But anyway, guys, that's my review of the week. As far as my predictions goes, I did well in some, didn't do too well in some, but that's the game of football. If you like this video, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down there if you're a new visitor. And to my new subscribers, thank you for joining in. Make sure to hit that like button down there too, because it's going to let YouTube know that they should circulate this video around. But until next time, guys, peace.